What's up, guys? Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com. So Twinmotion 2025.1 is here. I want to talk about the new features. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. So make sure to stick around to the end because they've added a feature that I think is unique to Twinmotion. It's going to make a huge difference in showing options in your renderings. All right, so first off, to access Twinmotion 2025.1, you need to be in the Epic Games launcher, and you need to go into the Unreal Engine section in the Twinmotion tab. Now, when you do that, you can click on the drop down right here to see the different versions that are available. So like, for example, I have 2024 and I don't think I have 2023 anymore, but in this case, in order to get this version 2025.1, it's the 2025.1 preview. That's probably the first thing that's worth mentioning, is this is a preview version, meaning it's kind of like a beta that anyone can access, but you may or may not want to use it for your actual project files. It may be fine, but you may see a little bit of instability while they're finalizing some of the features. But you should be able to just click the install button and then click on launch right here in order to open Twinmotion 2025.1. And so you can find more information on this release by visiting the Twinmotion 2025.1 preview release notes page on the Epic Games website. I'll link to it in the notes down below if you want to get more in depth. Note that there are some things down here that you should probably read through, but this should give you more information on what's contained in the new version. All right, so one of the first things we need to talk about is the redesign that they've done to the environment tab. And so you can access that tab by going over into Ambiance right here, and they've basically got the environment tab set up in a different way than they had it in here before. And so I think this is a good redesign. And so I think there was some confusion previously just about the way that this is laid out. This makes it very clear that you've got two options right now. You've got your dynamic sky and your HDRI. And so remember, your dynamic sky is just your sun. So you can adjust your sun location. You can see it in the sky right here. This is if you dynamically wanted to create the sky, but then the other option, if you click on it, is going to swap you to HDRI mode, which is going to use that HDRI environment to light your scene instead. So it's a very clear delineation between the two right here, instead of you having to go hunt for the different settings. And so one other thing you're going to note about this is as you scroll down, depending on which one you select, you're going to have different sets of options, right? So the options for the HDRI, for example, are going to be different than the options for the dynamic sky. So down below, you can see that these are sky specific options as opposed to having kind of like this weird collection of different things that may or may not apply. So organizationally, I really like this. Okay, now one thing we're going to notice is you've got this little box right here that kind of stands out next to your mouse. So this is actually cool. This is a cool new addition. Basically, they've given you the ability to access environment presets. So if you click in here, for example, notice how these are presets associated with that dynamic environment. So you've got access to sunset, you've got access to golden hour, you've got access to lunar surface. All of these are already in here as environment presets. Now, say that you created another preset. So say you wanted the sun kind of low right here, a little bit of a north offset, and maybe this direction right here. And let's say maybe we added some clouds. And there's some cool stuff going on with the clouds, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But say that you like this as a preset for whatever reason. You can click on the plus button right here in order to save your own preset. And I've accidentally done that twice, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to delete this. But now I've got my preset that I can access in the future. And you can rename it by clicking on the button right here and going to rename. So we can just call this morning. We'll just call it morning right here. But then if you ever want to adjust it, right? So say that you wanted this to have maybe like more clouds in here, and maybe you wanted to make it snowy or something like that. You can make this change right here. And you can click on the button for update in order to update that scene. And we can just call this morning snowy instead. So you can update those as well. I don't know if there's any limitations to the number that you can save in here, but this is actually really cool. cool, being able to save those environment presets. And so one thing about that is, as of right now, you can't really share those across users. So I think they're saved locally to your computer, meaning that you're limited to just keeping them on your computer and other people can't open them as of right now. So probably not that big of a deal for most people, but just note that as a limitation. Okay, so another feature that I'm actually pretty excited about is within the dynamic sky settings as well. If you scroll down inside of that dynamic sky right here, we now have the option for a new kind of clouds. That's a big deal to me because up till now you've been very limited with the kind of clouds that you could create in Twinmotion, right? You had the slider that would like add clouds or not, and you couldn't really do anything with it, right? You were just kind of limited to what it was. Well, if you click on the option for volumetric, what that's going to do is that's going to randomly create volumetric clouds that actually live in your scene. So you can actually adjust these by like location. You can randomize the seed in here. So what they do right here is they kind of randomize inside of your scene, and you can also adjust things about like their distribution, like how they're going to be distributed in your scene, the radius, other things like that. I don't know, kind of mess with the scale here to move them around a little bit, but you can use this in order to set the kinds of clouds that are in here like this, and you can really kind of customize those, and those are acting as kind of like volumes in the sky, which is interesting. Now, one thing I'm not sure about, let's play with this a little bit. So I'm not sure if they affect the shadows on the ground. So let's play with this a little bit. So if we go into our clouds, and we're gonna make it much more solid, it looks like they do, at least to a certain degree. So those are going to cast realistic shadows in your scene, which is a super cool setting, actually. I'm really excited about that one because those volumetric clouds really do gives you a lot more control over the look in your scenes in general. Now note that there are options in here. Ooh, I love these. There are options in here to access presets that are in here, and you can also save your own. So you can actually pick one of these and then build on top of it, right? So if you wanted like if you wanted this kind of cloud in here, you could build that, but then you could also come in here and you could adjust the seed randomly. So tons of options in here for working with these clouds. So this is super cool. I'm really excited about what people are going to be able to create in Twinmotion with this, because you did not have access to this kind of control of the clouds before. So another thing they've changed, which really gives you some better control over your scenes as well, is let's say that we were to let's add some rain into this scene. So I'm going to drag the slider to the right. We're going to add rain. We'll leave the rest of this as is, but say you wanted to create this kind of like rainy scene. Well, what they've done is they've improved the fog settings with some additional sliders. So basically, if you enable the fog right here, you now have a density slider which works a lot better, as well as a height slider. So if I crank this density up right here, right, notice what that's going to do is that's going to give me much better fog in the background, but then you've also got this option for the height. And so notice how as you drag the height of the fog is getting a lot thicker. So you can use this to create a much more substantial fog effect in your scene like this, which I think there's a ton you could do with this, not only with creating rainy scenes, but also with doing some other things as well. So I think people that are doing more like entertainment style stuff, you know, other planets, that kind of thing, this actually gives you a really interesting set of options in here for what you can do with this inside of Twinmotion. And so for those of you that have worked with other rendering softwares, you might have also seen these two other options that got added under Sky when we were scrolling through. These are somewhat common in other rendering programs, the turbidity and the atmosphere density. And basically what those are going to do is basically simulate the thickness of the atmosphere and particles in the atmosphere. So by cranking this turbidity up, for example, you can, it's basically almost like, I don't want to call it a smog setting, but it gives you that kind of like smog look, right? So if you crank that turbidity up, what it's doing is it's basically simulating particles in the atmosphere itself like this, which you can see is giving kind of a glow and a different look to the sky right here. So you can crank that all the way down in order to get a much clearer image, or you can crank it up a little bit more in order to make it look like there's more particles in the sky. And so the atmosphere density is basically going to affect the way that the sky affects the color of light, and the way that the different light wavelengths are going to scatter. So basically that atmosphere density, if you crank it up, notice how it's changing the color of the atmosphere in here. If you crank that down, and you don't necessarily want to be at 0, but notice how it's changing the color of the sky in here. So if you are using that artificial sky, notice how you can use this in order to really control the atmosphere of your scene. So I think this update from a sky and like artificial or dynamic sky environment is actually a pretty big one for people that are trying to use that rather than an HDRI image. All right, so next up, if you go into your lights, they've now added a light that's a projector light. What the projector light is going to do, I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees right here. And so what a projector light is going to do is it's going to project either an image or a video onto a wall. So say that I was to go into the details right here. Actually, we don't want details. We want to click on this button right here. But let's say we were to apply a video. So we're going to go to open. Let's say I was to pick one of my shorts for the SketchUp channel. So notice what this is going to do is this is actually going to apply this as a video texture that this is then projecting on the wall. You can adjust the scale, you can adjust aspect ratio, other things like that. So super cool tool for adding projections to your scenes. And it actually acts like a projector, meaning if I rotate it, it's going to rotate. So super fun from that standpoint. So if you go into your object library under particles, there's now a confetti particle system, which is more just fun, I think, than anything else. But like, for example, if I drag this particle system in here, remember this is actually going to generate these as if they're particles, and it's kind of simulating the way that they would react in here. So I don't think they actually affect things like the light, right? Like they're not blocking the light of the projector or anything like that, but they are a lot of fun for just kind of generating these particles inside of the 3D space. And you should be able to do things like adjusting the size, the shape, right? So you can use it to like shoot confetti up if you wanted to do that. So just super fun from that standpoint. Okay, so you've also got this new option in here for setting up LODs, or levels of detail, depending on where your camera is. And I'm gonna rotate this so that it's facing the light, just so you can kind of see it. And I've selected all the parts and pieces in here, but what I want to do is I want to select under LOD a preset. And we're just going to go with a simple LOD preset right here. And so when we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to set it up where basically what it's going to do is, depending on the size in the screen, it's going to swap out this lower poly versus higher poly right here. And you can do it by triangles as well, or you can do it by screen size, kind of up to you. We'll go with screen size for right now, but I'm going to click on apply, and we're actually going to go back to this simple LOD and click on apply. So what that's going to do is that's going to set this up, and you can kind of see it up here. Basically what this does is this creates lower poly options in here. And it looks like it might have only set it up for this upper object right here, which is fine for this demo. You may want to use models that have all the parts and pieces combined when you do this. But notice how as I zoom in, and you can kind of see it around the edge here. It's very subtle, but when I get to a certain point, it's swapping out for a lower level of detail, so it doesn't have to display as many tries in here. So you can kind of see that in here, but you can use this LOD setup for imported models that are super heavy in order to have them swap out for that lower LOD geometry in the background when you don't need it. So from a performance standpoint, that's actually really exciting. Right, so they've also added a feature that makes your shadows massively better in real-time render mode. So if you go into your render settings, and we'll take a look at this construction equipment piece, but if you go into render and you go down in your shadow settings to accurate instead of standard right here, notice what that does, and you can see it on this surface right here is it's going to give you much more accurate shadows based on the location of your sun inside of the sky. And I think let's play around with the HDRI real quick and make sure that this is working with the HDRI as well. Let's go ahead and let's adjust our rotation right here. I think maybe we want to pick an HDRI that gives us a little bit more pronounced shadows. So let's go into our HDRI environment, skies, low sun. We'll go with clear. This one looks like it'll cast some good shadows. Yep, and this is going to work as long as you're using the option for match HDRI in your directional light. This is going to work with your HDRIs as well because they're using the artificial light to cast some additional shadows. So notice how if you click between the two, you can see how you're getting a lot more shadow definition in here based on that sun location, even with the HDRI images. So massive improvement in image quality in real-time mode using those virtual shadow maps that have been added to the shadows section. So next up, we've got a tool that I think is going to make a massive difference in the way that you're going to be able to present things inside of Twinmotion that I'm super excited about. There's probably a second video about this floating around out there that I probably need to make. But basically what this is this gives us the ability to create interactive presentations, meaning it gives us the ability to make things that people can click on or that you can click on in order to show different states. And so there's multiple different kinds of configurations in here. There's properties, meaning that you can show different sizes, rotation, and placement of objects, or changing types of vegetation. There's also material switches, which is basically the ability to click on something and show different materials, as well as the ability to show or hide different parts of a model. So and different environments as well. So you basically set these as states inside of the configuration tab, and then you can click between them. And so I have not gotten like super far into this. It looks like you can set kind of a trigger layer that sits over top of something, but let's go ahead and let's create one of these really quickly. So, and one thing to note about this, these are currently not supported in cloud presentations, which is a bummer. I'm sure that'll get added eventually because cloud presentations and being able to share a link with something like that, I think could be extremely powerful. And you can't use visibility and ambiance applied to videos or image sequences. But let's take a look at the way this might work. So we've got this car right here. And so you control your configurations in the media tab. So you go to media down below and notice how there's this last option in here for configuration. So I can click in here and I can pick one of the things that I want to configure. In this case, material switch. I'm going to click on the plus button. And so I've got a state of 0, which means that this is going to be my current state. Okay, and so this is state 0. We've got a trigger over here. Well, now what I want to do is I want to create a new state. So we're going to go pick a car color surface. So we'll pick car paint right here. Say that we wanted a blue version of this car. So I'm going to drag this on top right here. I'm going to make it blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in here and I'm going to add a second state, right? This is going to be state 2 right here. And so notice now if I click between the different states, it saved the state of the material in this second state right here. Now, one thing to note about this is notice how right now this doesn't have an image associated with it, but I'm going to click in here and I'm going to click on capture thumbnail. And so when I capture a thumbnail, what it's going to do is it's going to use the image in the scene right here and create a thumbnail that you can click between. And so notice how this has overlaid a little button right here that you can click on like this in order to swap the colors inside of the viewport. Now, I'm not 100% clear on how I export this or anything like that. Like I said, this is actually a pretty big feature that I need to get into a little bit more, but being able to create these different configurations is actually a massive addition to Twinmotion. So there's also a new modeling tools panel, which gives you some different tools in here. Honestly, I haven't quite sorted this one out yet. I can't quite figure out what it's for, other than giving you the ability to delete some selected faces. So there's like a mirror option where you can mirror objects, and theoretically there's some merge modes with that, but again, I haven't been able to figure that one out. I think it's supposed to add some modeling functionality inside of Twinmotion, but I'm not 100% sure what the goal is with that one, but definitely interesting moving forward. One thing I would like to see, and maybe this is something that somebody else knows how to do, and sorry, I was playing around with the merge modes in here, so there's some extra stuff. I would love to be able to take a whole bunch of objects and just kind of merge them together. So, you know, a lot of these like FBXs or whatever come in like a whole bunch of parts and pieces, and I'd like to be able to just merge them together. So that would be a cool feature for the modeling section. And again, I mean, it feels like you should be able to do that with the merge objects mode, but I don't fully understand it. So it's not doing what I think that it should do, but I might be doing something wrong. But overall, super excited for this release. It is feature packed. The LODs are super cool. The shadow improvements are awesome. Just like everything in this release, this is a really well thought out release in my opinion, with some cool stuff in it. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. What do you think about this new version? As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.